Welcome to Allies or Enemies. I'm Jess.
And I am Shawn, and this is part 9 of our top 100 favorite board games of all time. And today, we are counting down from 20 to 11.
And the tricky thing is, whilst we've made this list, we have still been playing lots of games. And so there are some games that we play and I think, should I move that lower? Should I put it a bit higher? And I can't change it.
And there are new games like Planet Unknown up here that I have fallen in love with, but we didn't get it till we were halfway through the list, so I'm sorry, Planet Unknown. But let's talk about the actual list as we've got it, and let's start with my number 20. My number 20 is Between Two Castles of Mad King Ludwig, and I'm as surprised as you are to find this on my list, but I was looking at our list of games that we've played, and this is one of the games we played the absolute most this year, and I just kind of realized, you know what? I love it. I love playing it, and the weirdest thing is we only play this at 2. This is specifically a 3 to 7 player game with a 2-player variant, which usually suggests not that good at 2. And we only use the 2-player variant from the expansion Secrets and Soirees, in which you build your own castle. But playing that way, this game is just a terrific, super fast tile placement game where I take a tile I want and I give Jess a tile I know she doesn't want, and then she tries to find a home for it. And it is super fun.
And it really works for us because of that giving the other person a tile, because you always say like, oh, thank you so much. And it's meant to be a terrible tile for you. And so we just have, because we play it so often, we do have some of those like inside jokes.
Yeah, it's just politeness. Also, it's mind games because I know Jess hates it every single time she gives me anything. It's the perfect tile, just what I wanted. There are trickies still with this game, like the scoring is a pain in the butt unless you've got I think there's an app for Apple, but we don't have Apple phones. But the scoring is a bit of a pain in the butt, but we just don't care. We just find this game so fun. It's one of those little like personal games that works really well for us. And that is why it is my number 20.
My number 20 is Viscounts of the West Kingdom, and this is my favorite of the West Kingdom series. I really love the castle in the center with the 3D castle and putting the people out, and that gives you kind of combo upon combos if you really kind of have a lot of people there. And then I also really enjoy the deck building element because the characters that you use for your deck are multi-use. They kind of dictate how far you can move and the icons of what actions you can perform. And then the icons give you an opportunity to try and maximize what you can do, because you might all of a sudden realize like, oh, I've got a lot of manuscript things. I may as well get the best manuscript right now. So you kind of have to shift on the spot based on like where you are on the board and what characters you have, which I appreciate.
There still is that focusing though, and Jess focuses on that castle like crazy, or at least she used to, because we got the expansions. And I said earlier in the list that I wondered if this would move after the expansions. 100%. Those 2 expansions make this game so much better. Gates of Gold and Keeper of Keys. And they just make the other avenues outside of the castle at least equally as strong.
Yeah, it is interesting that the other 2 avenues were kind of powered up, which is speaking to how strong the castle was before. And that is my number 20.
My number 19 is Clank Legacy, and we're not going to show you a lot of photos. Usually there's a lot of photos in the background here, but because we don't want to spoil anything, because this is a terrific experience. It's one of my favorite, this is my favorite not pandemic based legacy experience of any board game, and that's for a few things. First of all, it is a fun competitive game, but within the legacy there are just these like kind of cooperative moments where you almost have to work together, especially at 2 players. And the writing was funny. It was legitimately funny. And I don't know anything about Acquisitions Incorporated other than Xavier Woods from WWE was briefly in it, I understand. But I am interested now that we've played this because it just tickled me. Like, it was fun and funny and quick, and we just wanted to go back and back and back. and it's still playable when you're done, which is crazy for a legacy game.
Yeah, the humor is kind of about like the incompetence of middle management, which
Mm-hmm.
is something that you wouldn't think is funny, but they do a good job with it. And then the nice thing, as well as being able to play it, is you can use the deck for other Clank boards as well. So we were able to pick up a couple of the alternative Clank boards and just use our version of it to play on those too.
And I should clear, it's not funny like you're gonna die laughing. It's just for like setting the bar at board game legacy game at what you think might be funny. It's a little bit funnier than that, which is great. So this is 19 on my list.
My number 19 is Tapestry from Stonemaier Games. I really love the chunky buildings that they use and the colors, but it is an asymmetric civilization game. And I think that's part of what I really appreciate is I think we played this over 25 times, and I still haven't tried every single civilization. So there are a few caveats because whenever we play, we don't really play against each other because there's a little bit of, it's not quite balanced, but we really appreciate the challenge of seeing how well can we do with the civilization that we have and the tapestry cards that we get and really kind of challenge ourselves to, and we keep track of all our scores to see like, how did we maximize our turns?
Yeah, I like this one too because my number 18 is Tapestry. And yeah, and I do agree. Partly though, to be fair, they have done a lot of work to try and balance the civilizations, and you can go online or even in the expansions, there are balance sheets. We just don't use them because it just doesn't feel good to start at like minus 10 points or with two fewer resources or whatever it is to balance it out. For a lot of people, they're really going to like that, but we find that we just like it better to kind of play it against however we did last time. But I really like this game. I like the moving up the different tracks and the comboing it and the finding. This time I'm really going to focus science and how different that feels to focusing on tech or to focusing on military especially, and how different all of those feel. I will say though, I would only play this to two players. And we don't play with the bot either. We just play straight up with two players. And we like that because we're not really getting in each other's way. So if you want to get in each other's way, three would be better. 4 or 5, though, it gets a little long. But two players, I find, is really a sweet spot. And that is my 18.
And also, the expansions are great, particularly the arts and architecture. And that is my number 19. My number 18 is Rajas of the Ganges. And Rajas of the Ganges is a dice placement game. But I find that usually there's something that you can do with those dice. Because if you roll a low number, you're able to kind of go along the river track. If you roll high, you're able to build buildings. And I just feel like there's always so many options because you're building your tableau of buildings and you're trying to kind of get some resources or get the temples. And part of that goes into how you score with the two different tracks. And so sometimes you might have a lot on the money track, is it? And then a lot on the fame track. And then the end of the game is triggered when those two cross over, which I always find is an interesting mechanic.
And this is the highest, I think, I don't know what's in your top 10 yet, but this is so far the highest game on your list that is not on my list at all. And this one just hasn't connected with me. But I see why people like it a lot, especially that scoring thing, which Arc Nova uses as well. I think that's very, very clever. And there's a lot of really clever things in it. It just, sometimes good games just aren't for you. And this one just isn't for me. But I get why Jess likes it. And I happily play it with her on occasion.
And that is my number 18.
My number 17 is Draftosaurus. And I know this is very high on a list like this to have such a light game. But I think so much goes into making such a terrific, perfectly made light game. It's such a difficult thing, and I think it's probably underappreciated. And this is one of my absolute favorites. And it's because, first of all, it's a whole bunch of just dinosaurs that you're pulling out of a bag. And what's not to like about that? Also, both of the expansions add to it, I think, especially the plesiosaurs, which run down the river as well. And it just has that, just the feel of it, of taking out the dinosaurs and then drafting them around the table, and then every single time you're putting a dinosaur down and it's adding something to your board, and you can see the little combos forming, and it just, every single thing that you do feels good and feels fun, and it's super fast, and everyone I've ever played it with loves it. And yeah, just a great light game.
And we play it a lot at two players, and we've talked before about the two-player version where you kind of get rid of one, which can be to the detriment of the person you're playing against. But the other thing that's interesting with that is for at least your first little bit of dinosaurs, you know some of those are coming back to you. So that might help you plan out a little bit of what to do based on how many of the different dinos there are. You can kind of like bet your odds of getting a certain one back when it's your turn to draft again.
Yeah, we obviously really like two-player drafting games because I think a lot of the reason I like this is exactly the same reasons that I like Between Two Castles. I think there's a lot of similarities between the two games. But this one is easier to score, so it is higher on my list. And it's got dinosaurs, so that is my 17.
My number 17 is Between Two Castles, which was just mentioned and was on your list a little bit earlier. But I also love it. It's a light tile drafting game that you're building a castle, and I love castles. I really appreciate all of the detail that has gone into each of the individual rooms. Nothing is generic. Even the hallways have like nice little individual art and individual names. And every time we score our castles, which admittedly is a bit of a pain, I do make us name all of the rooms. So instead of just saying, I've got 4 bedrooms, I make us say, I've got the princess chamber, and you have to name them all. That's part of the fun.
Yes, so she takes already arduous scoring process and doubles how much we have to do in it. But admittedly, it does actually make it more fun that we take that longish scoring process, and that becomes a big part of the game. Just talking about, okay, how does this work? What is this crazy room? How do these ones connect together? Look at this like run of nonsense rooms that I have here.
And you got the board game room. That's exciting.
Yes, and then we get into like, oh, what are the games in that room? Yeah, we get lost in building the castles as much as we competitively play the game, I think.
And that's part of why I appreciate it, and that's why it's my number 17.
My number 16 is Spirit Island, and this is really a jump from a pretty light game to a much heavier game. Spirit Island is one of our favorite co-op games, and that's for a lot of reasons. One is the challenge. Is quite a challenging game, and we're just getting to the point where we're starting to use some of those actual invader cards, and we're starting to use some of the different blight cards, and there's so many levers that you can use in this game, and we're just using a couple of them right now, other than the asymmetric spirits as well, which is really one of the reasons I love this game. And I think we would be so much better at it if we didn't need to play every single spirit, but both of us need to explore everything in every game that we have. So we're just run through each of the spirits, and whenever we get a new one, we're back to 0 again. But that is really fun because they play so different.
I think one of the key parts of how they play as well is as what's called their innate powers. And that's where you're trying to get enough of a certain symbol to set off what can be some really powerful kind of attacks. And so a key part of it is card drafting, not only for what the cards can do, but then what symbols that they have on them to try and kind of have that like synergy of the symbols that will set off your innate powers.
There's a lot going on in this, and I really appreciate that design because for so much going on, it's such a tight design for such a heavy game. And that is my 16.
My number 16 is Caverna. This is my favorite Uwe Rosenberg game, and I really like the mix of the outdoor farming that you do that is quite common in Uwe Rosenberg games. But also, similar to my previous game of Between Two Castles, I really like the room placements in the caverns. And again, there are some fun tiles. I'm always going to try and get the cuddle room because you get to put sheep in there, and then you can put sheep in your farm, and then you can have just like a whole board filled with sheep. But what also made me appreciate this even more was the expansion, the Forgotten Folk, that added asymmetry in the characters that you are. And so some of them play very differently. Some do very little farming, some do very little kind of cave dwelling. And again, we really like just trying out each of the different ones and seeing how they play.
Yeah, and it's just such a cute, fun game. And a lot of Uwe Rosenberg's games feel a little bit heavy. Stuff like Le Havre especially. And they feel like they are brain burny and they feel like they're going to be hard. And they are a little. And this one's as hard as the rest of them, but I think it's just all those light touches, all those fun little bits of that you're dwarves and that the things you're doing are just kind of innately fun, just makes it more fun. And I really appreciate that about Caverna.
Yeah, it just has a little bit more of a lighthearted feel to it, even though it's still a thinky game. And that is my number 16.
My number 15 is Root. And we've mentioned asymmetry quite a bit on this list. And when you think about asymmetry, this is one of the very first games to come to mind because it is this has got asymmetry out the wazoo. Every single faction plays completely different from the other factions. And they're all kind of representative of like real life kind of armies a little bit. Like this is basically a coin game, but with super adorable animals in it. And it's so interesting to play all of these different ones. And it's one of the few real fighty games that I can get Jess to play, so I really appreciate it for that as well.
Yeah, there's something about it that it feels less like I'm being personally attacked. I don't know if it's because each of them have different goals, and so it feels a little bit like, oh, of course you need to come here because you need this territory. There is something about it that makes me appreciate it, and I do love delving into the various types of factions and seeing how they play. But what I really like too is the latest version of with the hirelings, because it gives a little bit of a catch-up mechanic by letting you like hold on to the hirelings a little bit longer if you're behind, which I really appreciate.
And those hirelings as well made it a lot better for the 2-player versions. We did a video about this a while back, and in that we said we were kind of on the fence with the 2-player, although the clockwork changed that as well. But I actually really like using the hirelings for that. If you're 2 of the bigger factions and then the hirelings, actually works pretty well now at 2, we have found, which lets us bring it to the table even more. So that's great. And this is my 15.
My number 15 is Trails of Tucana, and we both love roll and write games, and this is my favorite. I really appreciate the simplicity. It is pretty easy to explain. Each round, 2 cards get flipped. Each card has a different terrain, and you draw 1 line from the center of one hex to the center of another hex. And then that's it, basically, as you're trying to kind of connect the different cities. But everyone is always doing different routes, and then there is a little bit of like, as the deck is running out, that kind of wishful thinking of hoping that the right matches come up. And there is something about connecting lines and almost being 1 line short that really makes you want to play again.
Yeah, it's just so easy. Like every time you see the 2 cards out, you just got to draw a line. But it's so interesting in that, and it's got kind of that instant feedback of everything that you do is like, oh great, I'm 1 step closer, and everything feels like it's useful, at least almost always. And you've got those little bits where, you know, you're connecting up the animals or the different icons to your home base, which sometimes gives you that extra turn as well, which also feels good. It always feels good, and I think that's why it's such an easy sell to people, and it looks fun and it looks nice making a map.
And there are 2 sides as well, so we all kind of always play first the small island and then the big island, and we always have fun playing, which is why that's my number 15.
My number 14 is Carcassonne. So I'm going a little bit old school here, but this is my first love. This is the game that got me into European hobby board games, and I still play it. I've been playing this game for 15 years. We just bought another expansion for it like a couple of weeks ago. I just continue to be interested in this game, and you don't really need the expansions. It works great by itself, or if it's Hunters and Gatherers or any of the other base games, really. Just the system works so well because you're just putting down a tile and you're putting a dude on that tile, and then sometimes you're scoring things when you finish them, and there's something about that just connects to like human nature. It's like building a puzzle. You finish the castle, you pick up your guys, you get your points, and you feel great about it, and it just continues to be fun. That simplicity is just pure genius.
Yeah, with the base game, it is really satisfying to build out the whole region together, which seems very cooperative because you're both doing it. But it is so cutthroat.
Yeah.
And like I remember when we were playing early on, and you like stole this giant castle away from me, and then since then I have been very aggressive and trying to steal the cities back from you as well. So it does go both ways now, but it is fun to build out and to try and see what you end up with at the end.
Yeah, having that big map at the end, it's great to just look at that. And I love the moment in this game when you teach it to new players and they think, oh, what a lovely game, and we're building together, and then they realize, oh, this is very mean, and then it has that switch of almost co-op to very competitive, and it's one of my favorite parts about it. And that is my 14.
My number 14 is Marvel Champions, and I love cooperative games. And one thing that I really appreciate about Marvel Champions is how many different characters we can be, because as soon as we got the base game, we very quickly have since picked up every single character.
Yeah, people have said in the comments before we got this, oh, you got to get it. And I was always like, no, because I'll buy everything. I know that I will. And I was right. We went nuts with it. You don't need everything, but we've got it.
And I do really enjoy picking up a character I hadn't been before and playing with them and trying to figure out how they play, and not only how they play on their own, but how they kind of match up against the different villains, because some are much stronger against certain villains and weaker against others. And then how they also pair up with whoever you're playing with too, because sometimes that can really complement each other too.
Yeah, I love comic books, and this just lets you really play in the Marvel universe. Like, there's so many different, we've got, I don't know, 35, 36 characters, some nonsense now, and then the X-Men are coming out next, so that's going to go crazy. But we've got just such a cool range of characters, and mixing them together, and those different bad guys play so different at such different levels. Some are too hard, some are Ronan, come on. And some are, nice and easy, and like Rhino, and not the huge problems. You can kind of try them out. And it's really nice to be able to play such different games within that same system.
Yeah, and so it is fun to take on those challenges. And that is my number 14.
My number 13 is Horrified, and I'm clumping both games together, but if I had to choose it a push, I would probably go with Universal Monsters, just because I love the movies so much. But Horrified is a nice, simple co-op game, and I've got a lot of light-ish games on this list. I feel like in my head I'm a heavier gamer than this, but I just look at what are the games I want to play over and over and over again, and often it's kind of those light to medium weight games. This is just such a great light co-op game that we just come back to and back to and back to. And it's great because you've got those different bad guys, and all of them have a little bit of a different challenge, and you can make this game pretty challenging. If you go up to 4 bad guys, we've only beat that like once or twice ever. And just the look of it and everything about it just brings me in, and I love this world.
And I think that is the world that really is the draw, because the Universal Monsters one make the board incorporate all of the different parts from all the different movies, but yet it's still this one village. And then all of the villagers that come out are again linked to those movies, which we rewatched as soon as we got this board game. So it is fun having those little connections too.
Yeah, getting like Abbott and Costello moving around, and just a lot of those little touches really make the difference. And that is my number 13.
My number 13 is Gaia Project. And Gaia Project is kind of hard to explain because it's a little bit of area control. There's resource management. There's also tech trees as well. But this one has, I think, like 14 different factions that you can be in. All of them play so differently. So again, it's really interesting to take on a new faction, try and maximize how they play. But the neat thing with Gaia Project is really trying to kind of match up your faction with all of the options for the tech trees. And each of those tech trees as well, some of the bonus tiles that you get are different each game, because all of those get randomized, and then factor in the different randomized goals that happen for each of the rounds. So each game, no matter what, feels so different.
Yeah, this is I straight up love this game. This is a tremendous game, and this is one of the games that kind of won me over a little bit to solo gaming. And I don't do a lot of solo gaming, but the solo mode in this is tremendous. To be able to do such a complex game as this with just like a deck of cards and then have that work for all the different factions, it blows my mind how good this solo mode is and just how good this game is. This game, oh, this game is great.
It is really great, and it is super interesting to just always trying to like puzzle out what can I do? Do I have to call it now, or can I squeeze one more thing out of my turn before the end of the round? And that is my number 13.
My number 12 is Arc Nova. And Arc Nova, everyone's been talking about it for like the last year. This is like the big thing. And there's such a good reason for that because it takes a lot of stuff from other games, but it takes all the exact right parts and it puts them together in such a pleasing way where you've got that card system from Civilization and New Dawn. You've got that scoring system that's a lot like Rajas of the Ganges. You've got the cards that are like Terraforming Mars. You've got all these, and then you've got the tile placement section as well, and also the little bit of worker placement in there as well. But all of those different parts work together so smoothly that it feels like it sounds like it's going to be a lot, and then it isn't. It feels so instinctive.
And I do appreciate that it's not just building a zoo, but it's the conservation aspect, because getting those conservation points is really crucial. And part of that is often like you might be releasing an animal back into the wild, or you might be focusing on kind of certain types of animals. And I really appreciate that it's kind of taken a zoo building game basically up to kind of modern standards.
Yeah, and it doesn't feel like it's just lip service either. Like that's so embedded within the game, the conservation message. And yeah, and I really do appreciate that about it as well. So that is my number 12.
My number 12 is Barren Park, and Barren Park is a very instinctive tile placement game. You start off with only having one board that has a few different symbols, and on your turn you have to place a tile on top of those symbols to be able to get new ones. And your whole goal is to kind of build out your bear park, so you get kind of more boards, you get more of the different types of enclosures for the different bears, and you're competing for all of the various goals. But there's something that's just so satisfying about fitting in those Tetris shapes like just right, and then like covering that shape that like lets you grab that tile before your opponent does, that there is enough of it there to like be really pleased with how your park's coming along, but a little bit of that competitive element of like, oh yeah, I beat you to that goal as well.
Yeah, I love the simplicity. Phil Walker Harding's so good at building out a game that has like 2 rules. Like there are so few rules in this. It really is just put down a tile, take whatever it is that the tile went on top of, and that's it. But within that, it's so interesting and it's so fun, and just every single time you put down a tile and then you get a tile, and it's nice to get a thing, and it just constantly feels good and interesting and fun. And because it's bears, like you're just building a bear park, which is nonsense. I don't know if these really exist, but just that there's just a park of bears.
And I do like that almost every game we pretty much both finish our parks or come so close. And so it is really nice to just have this full bear park at the end. And that is my number 12.
My number 11 is Lost Ruins of Arnak. And I was so hyped for this game to come out. I'd heard about it months and months before, and it was going to be this cool Indiana Jones game. And I was like, this is going to be my favorite game of the year. I was convinced, and I was so excited. And when I finally got it, it totally lived up to those expectations. I love the theme, but I really love just that decision space of how you can only put down 2 workers every turn, and you only have so many resources and 5 cards. But within that, you somehow are able to combo your way to move up that side track and to visit a bunch of different things and to get rid of the monsters or whatever they are that are haunting the island. And it amazes me every game that we're at the start of that track, at that sideboard track, and I think there's no way I'm getting to the top of this game. And then I get to turn 5 and 6, and all of a sudden I can move up the top half of that game, and that all comes down to just genius level game design.
Yeah, it is interesting because it is kind of at that halfway point when you're like, I don't know if I can do this. Like, we are running out of time here. But by that point, you've acquired like enough different item cards and enough different assistants that you're able to just kind of use this assistant to place this worker here, and that will get you these resources, which let you move up the track to return your assistant to use again. And like, I love finding those combinations and making something work. And like, very rarely now do we not get to the top of the research track too.
Yeah, it's great when a game can make you feel smart, and I don't know of a lot of games that make me feel smarter than this. And I like to feel smart. It doesn't happen enough, so it is really nice to play this, and the expansion too, with the different characters. That adds a whole other level as well. I wouldn't play without them now. But that is my number 11.
My number 11 is Dune Imperium, and this was a contender with Lost Ruins of Arnak for Best Game of 2020, and I really enjoy both of them. What I like about Dune is the tie into the Dune universe, and I think they've done a really good job. I mean, the characters feel like the characters, whether you know them from the books or from the movies, and kind of that Stark look. But it's a worker placement game that is really tight water resource management, which is really appropriate. And then the combat, I appreciate. It's so clever. Again, it feels less personal because it is just kind of sending troops out, and you kind of have a sense on how competitive that you are.
Yeah, it's a little bit kind of like almost a war of attrition. It feels like the combat, which is very Dune-y as well, and also that other side thing of just like the political part of it, which is also so Dune. Like, everything in it feels so Dune.
And I just love the tension with each point that you're scraping. Each point is so hard to come by. So every time you get it, it's so satisfying. And that is my number 11.
Yeah. And that is it. That brings us all the way down to number 11, which means next time we are finishing it off. It is the top 10.
And I'm excited for the top 10, our top 10 favorite games. So thank you so much for watching. If you've played any of the games that we mentioned, please put that in the comments. Let us know what you think. Please like, subscribe, and hopefully we'll see you for the next one.